For our next technical session, we have Mr. Amardeep Punhani, Senior Director R&D at NXP India.
Hello everyone, I am Amardeep Punhani from NXP Semiconductors India. I'll be talking today about automotive devices security architecture, which is a topic of interest across many firms, many technical community, because of the varied challenges that it essentially presents to us. So let me just start with some of the details around what automotive security is all about. And while I say this, why this becomes important is because if I take you back to 2015, where there was this interesting Grand Cherokee hacking that happened in the US, which actually was in a way that people from a remote side were able to enter into the car, and from there they were able to completely access the minute details within the car and manage variety of operations, including starting, stopping, including steering and so forth, which actually brought in the perspective that it actually opened everyone's eyes in terms of why this is so important from the human safety perspective and so forth. So there's a lot of interest on this in the industry. So when we talk about automotive security, the various things that are basically to be secured are one, the secure interfaces. The car basically today is highly connected, and it is interacting with variety of items outside. So basically, we need strong encryption and authentication to ensure that the vehicle is communicating rightly and with the trusted devices. So that is important. Secure gateway. This is important because this is the layer which acts as a firewall to control the access from all the external interfaces, for example, the internet, to the inside network of the vehicle, and it controls various nodes within, so that they are communicating rightly with the outside system. Next is secure network. So our secure network layer protects the communication over various in-vehicle network against the data manipulation and data theft. It includes things like intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, containment, and so forth, all within the vehicle. Then secure processes, which for the semiconductor industry becomes one of the most important topic, because if you look at a processor, any ECU and so forth, so they generate, process, exchange, and transfer a huge amount of data across the chip and between the chips inside the vehicle, and therefore they become a very attractive target for the hackers. Therefore, dedicated security modules are required inside them so that the software manipulation can be avoided and secure software updates can be done. And last but not the least is the secure access, which basically is the traditional physical vehicle access, which is things like anti-theft immobilizers or smart car access. And there is a lot of innovation that is going into this at the moment for locking and unlocking of the car, passive start, remote vehicle monitoring, and so forth, which are things like smart keys, which are important and becoming extremely relevant in today's connected world. So these are the few key areas. What we are going to focusing today is more on the secure processors, and then within that, specifically on the some of the key aspects. So within the processor, how basically the architecture looks like, then the secure boot flow and its associated advantages. There are a variety of security attacks that are possible on these devices today, and also there are hardening opportunities for protecting against these security vulnerabilities, which are very, very relevant. So these are going to be the focus areas for us today in this presentation. Now, specifically on the security architecture, just to give a high-level picture. So today's SoCs basically have a clear distinction usually between a security engine and an application processor. So they are separated out. And a secure engine basically becomes a highly secure environment which actually performs variety of functions. So, things like, having crypto services inside, generation and distribution of keys. There is a master root key that could maintain tamper detection and so forth. So there are a variety of functions that it does. There are also things like authentication is one piece that becomes extremely important. But when we look at the devices today, there are other elements like the integrity of the data is important. Confidentiality of the data is equally important because there is a lot of there is IP that is going into these designs, so it's important that we are protecting those. And also, being automotive devices, one thing which is very important is the availability, because the hack could happen at any point in time, maybe a runtime of the vehicle. Therefore, it's important that we are ensuring that the availability of key functions remain even when a secure access is attempted. So there are various variety of levels within which the secure engine can actually interact. So a typical security engine would consist of a dedicated processor, maybe a coprocessor, and memory associated with it. So it would also control the secure boot. It ensures that the platform security is there. So through secure boot, essentially, or during the secure boot, it is actually controlling the whole platform that is running the SoC. It provides security services, for example, the application bootloader and the operating systems, etc., can be securely verified for their trustworthiness through the security engine. We'll talk more about this. Protects the SoC from the security threats or attacks and applies the appropriate sanctions. So sanctions, could be maybe a simple reset on the application processor, or it could be a variety of other graded sanctions that can be put depending on the type of attack that is interpreted by the security engine. The dedicated and isolated security engine is designed actually to protect any manipulation of data as well on the firmware, or on maybe if it's a hardware, then detecting it. So these are highly sophisticated security architecture systems that are there today, and bring in a lot of value in terms of ensuring that the hack essentially doesn't happen. So with this high level view, so what is a secure boot? So during the booting process, there are a variety of steps that actually happen, which can be subject to security threats, and those are often exploited by the hackers. So secure boot essentially means to be a process of booting a device into a known trusted state, using a trusted software, blocking any malware in between, and making sure that the right version of the software is essentially used. Now, this is bringing the device into a secure state, and also it is intended to protect the code at runtime, and the code that the manufacturer essentially wanted to use during the time of the execution. So all these are important and become the motivation for secure boot. So to understand the concept of secure boot, it's important that we also understand the root of trust. So basically, what is important is that the first step in securing an SoC when we are booting it up is to basically have that small initial first code that can be trusted. Which is probably like maybe a firmware, a small, very very small piece of code that is very simply written, probably somewhere in a read-only memory inside the device with proper read protections, and that becomes the basic code which you can always trust, and that is what we call the root of trust, essentially. And this is the source and starting point which can always be trusted in a cryptographic system, as I mentioned. And this source can then be used as an anchor to build the further booting of the firmware and the application code. And each stage then is essentially verified and as they get verified, we basically call it the chain of trust that get created over the period of these steps. So this is ideally built based on hardware validated boot process to ensure the system can only be started using code maybe from a very immutable source like a boot ROM. And this is the foundation basically of the secure boot, and combining with the cryptographic system that makes it a highly inaccessible system essentially. Now, secure boot flow, if we simplify it, essentially it's it's basically a functioning of let me just bring the pointer here. So it's basically a functioning of the security engine and the application processor. So at a very high level, you have a secure boot enabled. If it is not, the device would simply move to the application processor, doing the boot, releasing the reset, and moving forward. If the secure boot is enabled, in that case, it will check the firmware for signature, and confirm that it is actually correct signature that was intended. And once it has done this authentication, only then it will release the reset on the application processor for it to move forward. So at the high level, very simple, but then there are a large number of steps that are associated within to actually make it work, to get the chain of trust running. Understanding better on the next level details around the secure boot. So secure boot may be set up to verify a small subset of application firmware. For example, the application bootloader. And the further stages, for example, the OS or the application, can actually be verified by applying the secure boot concept during further software initialization to establish a chain of trust. Starting from the hardware-assisted secure boot down to each component of the software stack. That's important, and it actually goes forward in the stages. So if you look at this diagram, that probably provides a little bit more details about how the various stages are working. So initially, the security engine takes the control, and the boot essentially initiates through this, through the boot ROM, which is the root of trust. And then essentially it would verify the application processor first stage bootloader, which can be a very small piece of application processor code. And once this is verified, the secure boot would essentially give a command to the bootloader to get started. And then we can initiate the whole chain. So once this bootloader is initiated, it can open up the second stage of the firmware, which will again get, the signature will get verified through the security engine. And then, the command will be there for the firmware essentially to get started on the stage number 4. And this process essentially continues, and it can continue till all the stages of the OS, the application, and the whole of the security stack, essentially the software stack essentially are validated, and the application is up and running. And this is what we call the boot chain verification through the process. Now, while doing this, there are various sequential, so there are a variety of boots actually that are possible, and a couple of very interesting boots that we see often being considered are the sequential boot and the parallel boot. Both are basically variety of secure boot itself. So the most commonly used boot is the sequential boot, in which case there's a common approach that these will run sequentially. So that basically the security engine is, is first initiating, and then the application processor begins, and then, it goes through this, exchanging and then moves forward. The other approach, which we call the parallel boot, is the one where actually both can start together. The application processor can also initiate the boot process, through the application core and going to the bootloader and the firmware, while in parallel the authentication is continuing. Now these become important for latency critical devices, and if in these cases at a later point in time an authentication issue is identified, then the application processor can always be sanctioned to either stop or make some corrective measures. So this is where a trade-off between the latency and security is essentially set up. And in automotive devices, you would often see that both can actually be running in parallel. So a specific processor can actually be going into a sequential one, while the other one can be in parallel, or the processors can be configured to go either way depending on the application they are actually getting into. Okay, the other stage which is very important essentially is the life cycle management, which is what we hear about always as part of the security of these devices. So life cycle management is important for getting differential access during the course of device development. So typically, if you look at this diagram, which at a very very high level might not be all the stages being there, but it provides at a very very high level what the life cycle stages could be for a particular device. And you would note that some are basically initial during the when it is coming out of a fab. It will be a certain stage. When it is at a certain when it is the MCU testing and development is going on, which is the MCU production stage in a way. So those are the places where more testing features are enabled, debug features are enabled, and so forth. But then when we move it on to tier ones or OEMs, in those cases, the life cycle would actually move forward, and basically you would only provide those facilities essentially, or those capabilities inside the chip that are needed for that stage. For example, in field, maybe you need lesser amount of debug capabilities than you would need in a lab when the actual testing of the MCU is progressing. So therefore, that differential essentially is created. And secure boot, every time a boot is happening, it actually is helping and assisting that the right level of authentication is happening, and integrity and confidentiality is maintained through the life cycle stages of the device. There are various other services that are associated with secure boot. For example, provisioning of device-specific keys. The OTA is very important, extremely important actually, in the automotive devices today, and the support of updating the firmware images when there is a complete new firmware image that is coming your way. So how you basically handle that image, secure boot plays a very very important role there. And as we go forward, because recalls are difficult, and because people want to the OEMs want to keep the cars actually latest and greatest in terms of the software, as we continue to see on variety of internet enabled cars today, this thing is becoming more and more important. And these are the times when security hacking becomes a key challenge, and becomes useful to do this. Setting up of debug authentication or secure boot through low power modes, and like I said, device integrity and confidentiality become important, and many more. So this is a very very high level view on the secure boot aspects. Now let's also look at a little bit on the various attacks that could be there. And this I like this diagram basically, which provides a good view on the attack probability and the attack potential. So the variety of attacks that can actually happen on a car, especially, depends on what kind of accessibility is there. So the accessibility to the hacker is high. In that case, the attack probability is high. But that might not necessarily mean that the potential of the attack or the cost of the attack is going to be high as well. So if you look at the interfaces, probably these are most accessible. Because the cars are connected, you can remotely access and things like that. So there the probability is the highest. But if you look at the ECUs and going back into the PCBs or the ICs, these require maybe local access into the vehicle. So accessibility is difficult. Maybe in the parking lot or in the garage, those things can be done. But they also require specialized equipment to do it. So probability is lesser. But if these hacks happen, then the impact that it can have is actually much higher. So the cost to the owner is actually way higher in having this thing in place. So this is important to consider in a car. Now let me get into a little bit on the types of security attacks that might come up. Okay, so if you look at the type of security attacks, we basically divide them into 5 key categories: on communication, on exposed functions, non-invasive attacks, semi-invasive attacks, and invasive attacks. So the ones that are usually on the interface could be the on communication or the on exposed function attack. So these on communication, for example, are usually protocol oriented attacks, where the attacker could be passively listening, or could be active participation in the communication, eavesdropping and things like that. On exposed functions, one could actually take advantage of the software defects or known hardware defects that could be there in the design, and use that essentially to manipulate or send messages in a way that the protocol handler is unable to process them or wrongly processes those messages. The non-invasive attacks essentially are what we also call the side channel attacks. So these are basically handled by observing the device for the specific signature or the characteristic. For example, power signature that might vary with how when the key exchange is happening, for example, or the electromagnetic radiation coming from the device, maybe the photo emissions that are happening. So these are actually nightmare for the semiconductor organizations, because it's very difficult to muffle them or to disguise these, and they can become a challenge. The other ones where actually a physical access is required, for example, the semi-invasive attacks. So these are where a glitch can be put on a certain signal, and that can ripple through the design and actually manipulate the design, or there could be spikes added, or even flashlights and laser beams through which you can bit flip and and then manipulate the design function. Invasive attacks, these are highly costly to do. You actually need the physical access of the chip, and probably require micro probing equipment or FIB to permanently change the circuitry of the design. Difficult to do, but can actually create a lot of havoc if they are done on the chip. Now let's also look at quickly on what are the various methods or the countermeasures that can be done. So as the name suggests, on communication, essentially you need to have protocols that are actually high on encryption, on authentication, or probably you need to have the right amount of network IDs so that the communication is encrypted. Exposed functions, it's important that very thorough code analysis is there. You have to, it's never possible to have a design without defects, but at least, security hardening can be done such that the security holes on the code are taken care of as much as possible, putting the right amount of firewalls. Non-invasive are the favorite ones, the side channel attacks. So things like, can we have maybe a constant power execution for the device such that it does not really give out any strong variations in power, which can then be exploited by the hacker, or maybe having a constant jitter going out or constant time execution going out so that the problem don't happen. What companies are often doing also is that in chip they are putting probably glitch detectors, which can actually check if there is any glitch that is coming in and take countermeasures associated with that. Maybe putting light sensors and things like that. And if there is a bit flip, if you have bit redundancy, triple voting flops and things like that, which are actually a safety concept but also used here to some extent, that you have redundancy such that if there is one bit flip happening, the other can be can still be the same, and you can rely on that for the actual reliable operation. Then in the invasive attacks, where shielding or masking or maybe tamper detects on the device itself, or camouflage logic, so that any micro probing or the FIB can also without knowing the exact logic, they probably are not able to handle these. So these are some of the measures that actually all the organizations are currently using to make this to make this work. In vehicles, it is also important to understand that which kind of a device will actually need higher security. For example, if you have a connectivity domain device which is actually interfacing outside, higher amount of accessibility, so those probably require a larger amount of security, maybe all inclusive here. A driver replacement is lesser accessible, but still, if a hack happens, it can be significantly problematic. So those require a significant amount of security measures as well built in. Powertrain devices or the experience devices, they are lesser accessible, but so maybe lesser than driver assistance. But if a hack happens, then those can really be problematic. So relatively lesser. The least is actually the body and comfort. That also requires a significant amount of security countermeasures to be put in, but still it is relatively lesser than, for example, a connectivity domain. So the organizations essentially, depending on which application the device is going into, can decide on what kind of countermeasures they want to put in the system. Just a good example of hardening, which is one of my favorites, where we have these power signatures coming in. So just a very high level picture on a differential power analysis that can be done. So you have these a device which is basically having key handling, and it is coming out with a power signature. Now what in the testing lab or in the hardening lab, what can be done is that you basically have a power consumption model for the device under attack, and you come up with a hypothetical power consumption in this case, and through a statistical model continue to analyze these, and if there is and across a multitude of combinations, then essentially check that if there is a match, you can basically identify the correct key. And instead of a hacker doing it, the organizations tend to do it so that they can have better control on they can basically control the side channel attacks through these hardening approaches. It's a vast topic, so a lot of things to discuss, but I think in the paucity of time, we'll probably end here, and I'll bring in the summary. So what we discussed at the high level is secure boot is an approach used to ensure the system boots up in a trusted state. We also discussed that the secure boot initiates from the root of trust and establishes the chain of trust. Booting securely enables not only the chain of trust but also multiple other functions. Talking about attacks, the possibility of attack will vary with the accessibility, and we discussed that attack possibility and the potential might be actually different. And there are multiple effective countermeasures that can be there, which are being very, very effectively used today to ensure that the vehicle remain as secure as possible. But again, security needs to be constantly ahead of the game, because newer and newer methods are coming in on how the hacks can happen. There are few references that you can look into. There's plethora of data that is there that can be seen. So some of them, which I have brought out here, so which should be of help. So with that, I end my presentation here.